Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Teal Tinted Glasses podcast. I am so glad that everybody's here. I do apologize for the lack of shows of late. And I have my audio in my ears. We got to turn that off. And my phone's freaking out. Anyway, so I do apologize for the delay. And I do apologize for a few things. And this is kind of the way I did want to start the show, with somewhat of an apology. So let's get that out of the way first. I want to apologize because I said our goal when we set out to do this year was to do this every other weekish. And it's been a month since we've been on. And there's a lot to that. I've had some pretty awful stuff happen in my personal life. I don't know how many you know, my grandfather passed away, and I think that kind of put me on my ass a lot worse than I thought it would. And I think it took me a while to really process that and deal with that. And also, I think that this team is incredibly unlikable right now. With everything going on, and we did cover like the Evander Kane stuff in the last show, but with all this stuff going on, like, I don't know if there has ever been a time where I've been less pumped to talk about this team, because I think that, obviously, I think things in the chat and everything eventually, Evander Kane, it's going to kind of circle back to Evander Kane. And I said in the last show, I do kind of regret the way we covered in the last show. Not that I regret anything I said, because I meant everything I said. And I think I stand behind everything I said. The thing was in the last show was I really didn't go into it with a layout. So I thought that when we finally got to talking about Evander Kane, we kind of talked in circles for like 40 minutes. And I wish in hindsight, I wish going back, I would have laid that out better so that we kind of hit the important things and maybe got through that topic quicker than we did. So the latest on Evander Kane, and again, I'm going to hit this right off the top, and then I'm done talking about it for the night. The latest on Evander Kane is obviously that the NHL are having trouble, with their investigation into Evander Kane's alleged gambling on hockey. And I said this in the last show, and I still think it's true. This route was going to be very difficult because the NHL, in order to act on this, they're going to have to find an incredibly smoking gun. And thus far, they haven't. And that's kind of to be expected. I think the idea that, the NHL was going to find something and it was going to be, clear cut, and Evander Kane was going to be gone and that was going to solve all the problems. I had very low faith in that happening. So, I mean, right now, as it stands, the Sharks are going to go into camp with Evander Kane on the team, for better or worse. And I will let that, you can decide for yourself if that is for better or for worse. And I said, that's kind of where we are with Evander Kane. And I really don't want to fucking talk about it anymore because, it's awful, right? Like, everything else that's going on. I mean, it's a divorce. Divorces are messy. They're gross. And, again, the T's in Teal Tinted Glasses are for Teal Tinted Glasses, not TMZ Tinted Glasses. So I think that's as far as we're going to go. Obviously, I'm not alone tonight. Tonight, I am also joined by Mr. Hockey Jerk. Mr. Hockey Jerk, how are you doing?
I'm good. You opened the show with an apology. I have nothing to apologize for.
There you go.
No, you know what? I'm glad to be back. It was, I don't want to say that I had any bad or unfortunate things happen to me this last month, but I just feel like this month was weird. I don't have a good reason for why. It was just weird. I wasn't, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, wasn't really on Twitter a lot. I wasn't on Discord as much as I normally am. It was, I don't know, just kind of a weird month. was more focused on, you know, everything else really. And I think, you know, as excited as I am for hockey to come back, you know, I already have the 3 dates that the Sharks are going to be in Vegas this year. I already have them marked on my calendar, so I'm obviously excited for that. But like you said, there's just so much bullshit going around with the team that it's hard to get pumped, because it's like it doesn't feel like there's anything to be pumped about.
Yeah, and I think it's sad because when like the start of last year, we covered everything that the Sharks had done in the offseason, and everything up to that point was good. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't like, and again, I'm not saying that, all these free agent acquisitions are gonna, put the Sharks over the hump, and it's this 2016 all over again. But like, there was a lot to like about what the Sharks had done in the offseason up before everything kind of just fell off a cliff.
Right. It all sort of spiraled out of control, and it was, we obviously, like you said, we talked about the Evander Kane stuff last show.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like kind of the one dark spot. But like you said, it's like, oh, some good signings. We got a new goalie. We bought out Jones. Like, everything was good, and now it's just like, oh, more Kane drama.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Hertl doesn't want to be here. This and that, Rocky Thompson quitting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, Jesus Christ.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So we're definitely going to get to that stuff, like with the Sharks, like, because we are going to talk about the Sharks stuff. Like, obviously we're going to talk about Hertl, and things that have to do with the game. We're going to cover it. Right. And obviously, there's going to be factors where, Kane is going to come up. I don't want to talk about any of that because it's awful, right? It's like, but the stuff where it impacts the team, like, obviously we're going to hit on those topics. But let's start with something fun first before we get into that, because tonight we're going to do some season previews for some of our division rivals. We're going to talk about some recent things that happened in the NHL that don't completely suck. And I thought, let's start with the offer sheet for Jesperi Kotkaniemi by the Carolina Hurricanes. What was your initial thoughts when the offer sheet came out? And then we'll go into, obviously, Carolina ending up getting the player. First offer sheet successful since, 2007?
Yeah, I when I saw it, I actually had somebody text me, and they said, they said something to the extent of, wow, what is Carolina doing? And I'm like, and immediately I'm thinking, like, okay, is this another Nedeljkovic situation where they've just cast someone away for nothing? And I look and I see that they offer sheeted KK Kotkaniemi, and as soon as I see it, I immediately 2019 pops to my head when Montreal offered Sebastian Aho, and I even tweeted it out. I said, payback's a bitch, and that was literally the first thing came to mind. There was no thought of where's he going to play in the lineup, how much is the offer sheet for? Like, none of that crossed my mind. My brain went to Sebastian Aho.
Right.
And I don't doubt that Carolina likes the player, because
Mm-hmm.
he's a good player already, and chances are he's going to eventually be a great player. But at the same time, you look at the structure of the deal, you look at the Hurricanes changing their Twitter account to be French language, you look at Tom Dundon's press release being word for word exactly the same as Marc Bergevin's from 2 years ago. And it seems like a game more than anything.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just going to say, it didn't feel like a situation where it's like, we want this player so bad that we're going to offer sheet him. Like, it almost felt like a game.
It did, and I know, like, a lot of people got their feathers ruffled about it, and like, I don't have an issue with anything like the Hurricanes did media-wise, right? Like,
oh, me neither.
I think it's hilarious. Now, from a team management perspective, though, I mean, it's definitely a head scratcher when you look at the quality of players they let walk away in the offseason, and you have a guy who is going to make $6 million. Now, I like the player. I like Jesperi Kotkaniemi, but is he a $6 point whatever $million player? No. Is he going to be one in a year? Probably not, and that's his qualifying offer, right? So I mean, you have to, not that every player signs their QO. I mean, I think one player has signed their QO in the last 5 years, and it's Patrick Laine.
Right. At least one player of stature.
Right. But like, I look at what they did and the way they let some really good players walk away. Like, you're telling me you couldn't. I mean, I understand that Dougie Hamilton made more than the 6, but you telling me you couldn't throw that 6 and then some over that way, or you don't keep your goalie that was ace in the playoffs, and now he's gone. Like, there's just things that they've done this summer where has any team turned heel this badly, like, over the span of one calendar year?
You know what? You're right. Like, you look at that. I mean, you just look at the specifically the trade for Nedeljkovic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, you get a 3rd round pick, but you get Jonathan Bernier too, who, I mean, he's not what he was back when he was on the LA Kings, but he had a good year this year on a very awful team, and so you're thinking, okay, maybe you get him.
I just wonder how much tread's left on those tires.
Right, and I was thinking the same thing, but ultimately I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's a 1B for you and it works out. He had a good year. And then they don't even sign him.
Yeah.
Like, so you basically get a 3rd round pick for Nedeljkovic, who by no means is Nedeljkovic a for sure number 1 starter goalie, but he certainly looked to be on that path. So I don't know why you would give up on him so soon. And I think it's pretty telling when you go back and look at Steve Yzerman's media availability after acquiring Nedeljkovic, and he basically said, well, you'd have to ask them why they were comfortable doing that. And
yeah, I mean, he's not wrong.
Right. And so it's just very peculiar, and like I'm looking at their roster right now, and it's just like they have 8. I mean, 8 NHL defensemen under contract. Jake Gardiner is going on long-term injury, so 7. But they have 7 guys, with the exception of Jacob Slavin, obviously. So 6. They have 6 guys who are all kind of the same player. You know what I mean?
Well, Brett Pesce's pretty good.
Yeah, Pesce. Okay, sure, Pesce's good as well. But like Brady Shea,
yeah,
Tony DeAngelo, gross. Brendan Smith, Ian Cole. Like, I don't know that these are guys you need to sign. I quite like getting Ethan Bear for Fogle. I did really like that.
Yeah, it's a good move.
But I'm just like looking. I'm like, the defense it's a lot, but it's not a lot of anything really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of weird things that they've done.
A lot of weird things, and like for a team that was like I said, like, this team was kind of like a kind of like a darling in the league, and now, like, I mean, obviously the DeAngelo thing obviously is going to turn a lot of people against them alone, but with the way, like, this is why I can only do one team, guys, because if I can't have more than one team doing things. Like, could you imagine? Like, I understand, like, some people, like Carolina was kind of like their second team because they're kind of got some nice things going on there, and then, like, and I get that. I'm not here to, like, poo-poo on people who want to cheer for more than one team. That's up to you, and that's, like, a personal thing. And again, I'm not trying to dissuade that. I'm just glad I only cheer for one team, because I could not deal with another team making me as angry as this team would have made me this summer, on top of everything going on in San Jose. Like, I don't know if I could. I'd have a mental breakdown, I think.
Right, and I look at the way, like, not so much their defense or their goaltending. I think I've been very critical of that, but I really like how their forwards are built. I think they have a very good group of forwards, and so I can appreciate that. But as you say, Carolina's been the darling of many people. I've never really liked them. Just like I said, I think their blue line and their goaltending has been poorly constructed for a long time. I think in the case of their blue line, it still is. And you have an owner who's in the you have to spend money to make money business, but doesn't like spending money.
Yeah.
Like the way, like, oh, well, we can't give Nedeljkovic $3 million, but here's $6 million for KK.
Yeah.
Here's $3 million for Ian Cole. Here's $1 million for Tony DeAngelo. Like it's obviously they're not in the Pacific Division, but it's very perplexing to me, and I don't feel like enough people talk about it.
Yeah. So obviously Montreal gets the first, and they get a first round pick in 2022 and a 2024. What did they get? They got a 20.
It was
a first and a third, didn't they?
A first and a third for the compensation.
Right. Yeah. First and a third for the compensation, and then they. And what did they do? They traded for Dvorak for a first and a second. That's where I got the first and a second, right?
Yep.
So it's the 2022 first, and the 2024 second round pick goes to the Arizona Coyotes for Christian Dvorak.
So
go ahead.
I like Christian Dvorak. I think he's
Me
a good
too.
player. He can score, he can kill penalties, he can win faceoffs, which is huge, as we know. But that is it's a bit rich to give up for that player, if you ask me. We'll obviously get to it, but if a first and a second is what Christian Dvorak costs, I mean, what does Hertl cost?
Right. I mean, now it should be stated though that Dvorak does have 4 years of term left on his deal.
He does,
and it's not a terrible deal. Like 4 point. I think it's what.
No,
4,
not
5?
at all. I mean, yeah, it's let's see, it's 4 years left at just under $4.5 million, which is good. I mean, Christian Dvorak is the second line center in this league, so you're getting a good player. There's no question there. I just think what Montreal gave up for him is a bit rich at this point in time, and you make a good point. He does have the term, which Hertl does not. I would argue that Hertl is, I mean, he's a better player. So
apparently, and rumor has it they did call on Hertl before they made the Dvorak deal.
Right, and I mean, based on everything that's happened so far, who hasn't, right? I wouldn't be surprised if everybody has.
Right. Yeah. So the picks that Carolina they get the better of the two picks. They either the Canadiens' first round pick or the Hurricanes' first round pick, which they obviously now have. Unless it's top 10, then they would get the one that's not in the top 10. I don't know if it happens if they're both in the top 10. I guess they still get the worst of the top 10s.
It would still, so like if Montreal's pick was 4th and Carolina was 9th, they would give up the 9th.
Which is really steep for Christian Dvorak, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, a good player, but that's very rich.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Dvorak's a guy that it'll be interesting because I think he's a good player. I think he's a better player than people think he is because he plays in Arizona. I don't think a lot of people realize how good he is because that Arizona team's obviously a dumpster fire and is, obviously trying to get to the bottom as quickly as they can.
Right. And you look at their roster too. If he gets to play with somebody like, maybe he gets to play with a Mike Hoffman or Brendan Gallagher or even Jonathan Drouin, I think that will help Dvorak as well. Because, I mean, you kind of saw it in Arizona, like when especially like if he played with Phil Kessel, it was a guy, specifically Kessel, who's comfortable when he has the puck, comfortable carrying it and moving the puck around. And I think maybe Dvorak needs that kind of player with him. So maybe you put him, like I said, with somebody like Brendan Gallagher, who's physical and can open up the lanes for them. And, somebody like I said, a Mike Hoffman who can skate with the puck and rip it, so I could see him grow. He's a consistent 35-point player right now. I could see him be a 50, 60-point guy. I don't think that's totally out of this world. Somebody on Twitter said that they see him hitting 90 points in Montreal.
Maybe. I mean, other than Nick Suzuki, what do they have for center depth?
Well, that's the thing. It's Nick Suzuki, and then it's
Christian Dvorak.
And then if they could put Drouin back at center, but I mean, I think everybody knows that that's not an option.
Yeah. The NHL is going to go back to the Olympics, barring COVID disaster.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's exciting. In 2018, I was very much like, I don't really care whether or not they go to the Olympics, but now I'm excited just because when you think about the possibilities. I mean, imagine specifically like Team Canada. Like if you, if McDavid and McKinnon end up on a line together, I mean, they could put you or I on that line and it would thrive. Like,
Yeah.
So I just think that would be really exciting to watch. And I think too, maybe I just am the only one who feels this way, but I feel like since 2016, when Team USA iced that disaster of a team at the World Cup, I feel like I've really wanted to see like almost kind of like a redemption arc a little bit, and now with the Olympics and with NHLers going, I mean, you can hopefully kind of see what a real like beefed up Team USA can do. You know what I mean? To get like somebody like, okay, this time around, compared to the World Cup of Hockey, you can have Johnny Gaudreau on the team. You can have Austin Matthews on the team, but also guys who
Jack Eichel.
Yeah, Jack Eichel as well. But then you still have some veteran guys who are still really good as well. I mean, Kane, Joe Pavelski, Blake Wheeler, Max Pacioretty. Like these are like Team USA could be really good, and now you've got Connor Hellebuck as your goalie. Like, I don't think it's smart to book a USA Canada gold medal game, but whether it's the gold medal or whether it's the exhibition round, I mean, I think it's gonna be a hell of a matchup, and it's exciting for this time around.
Yeah, I like the Olympics. I think the Olympics should always be best on best, right? I know like there's some people that are still out there and be like, oh, it should be for the amateurs. Who's playing men's professional hockey that's an amateur other than like US college players? Because there's no amateurs in Europe anymore.
Right.
Like where are all these amateurs? Right? Like it's gonna be, if they're gonna be KHL guys and guys from the men's leagues over in Europe. Like, so I don't see why we can't send NHLers. Like I've always hated that argument. Oh, it's the Olympics are for amateurs. Who's an amateur anymore? I mean, maybe in some of these sports where like obviously you can't do it for a living, but like that list seems to be getting smaller and smaller every year of sports that you don't do as a living.
Well, not only that, but I feel like in every other Olympic sport, like the people surrounding the sport, whether they cover the sport or they're involved in some capacity, they always say, oh, this person is here because they're the best, this person won because they're the best. And I don't understand why hockey needs to be the exception. You know what I mean? If you're going for the face-off and Connor McDavid is lining up against Joe Italy, I don't know how that's really anybody. I don't know how that's Team Canada's fault. Like,
yeah, no, for sure. I don't know if you saw this, but Eugene Melnyk was on an aircraft carrier. And he had a big mission accomplished banner behind him.
Did he really?
No, he didn't.
I was going to say, that sounds like something he would do.
That sounds like, no, that's something George Bush did like a long time ago. But,
right.
But basically Ottawa is saying that the rebuild's over and they've extended Pierre Dorion, their GM, until 24-25, I believe. Pierre Dorion getting extended doesn't bother me. I think given the situation that he's been saddled with in Ottawa, I think he's done really well, all things considered.
I agree. I think, coming out of that 2017 playoff run and then obviously the following season with the Matt Duchene drama, there was a lot of pressure to change things around. And all the big name players he traded away, obviously you hate to lose that player, a player of that caliber, but I think the Mark Stone one is kind of different, but for the most part, I think he hit a home run on all of his trades.
Yeah. Mark Stone, I think, would be the one where you kind of go, eh. But, I mean, you can't argue with his side of the Erik Karlsson deal at this point.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a knife right here on my desk. Do you mind if I put it in your back and then twist it a little bit?
No.
Because, dude, so a combination of certain fantasy hockey implications, but also a general interest as well.
Mm-hmm.
I watched quite a few Ottawa Senators games last season, and Josh Norris was a star for them.
I know.
He was so good.
I didn't think he was going to be that good.
I'm like, you look and you see, okay, 35 points in 56 games. Not bad as a rookie. Fourth place in Calder votes, but he was also out there. He killed quite a few penalties.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't like some penalty killing dynamo by any stretch, but he was out there. He was used in all situations, and he was spent most of the year with Brady Tkachuk,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it really worked out well for him. And now all of a sudden he looks like, forget third center or second center, he looks like their number one center.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is the hardest part of a rebuild, right? Is knowing when to come out of it, and like with the players in the draft, like this coming next year, like it's really easy to just be like, nah, we can bottom this out for a couple more years, and I think I give them a lot of credit, because I think it's really it's easy to go into a rebuild, but it's really hard to know when to come out of it.
Oh, for sure. And man, the one thing I would say is a bit suspect still is their goaltending. I don't know what's going on with Matt Murray. But I think, I think he can still turn it around. I mean, it's you have Thomas Chabot there. You have, Eric Brandstrom, who's got another year of developing. We'll see if he can be the next Erik Karlsson, like a lot of people thought he would be.
Yep.
I really like Artem Zub, who they got from the KHL last year. I think he's I hate to generalize, but for being a defenseman from Russia, I think he's very good at defense.
Yeah.
And so they've certainly got the pieces in the right places. Is the rebuild over? Hard to say, but I think just like last year, I think this year, they're really going to make it hard for a lot of teams. You could make the argument that division, Boston, Tampa, Toronto, and Florida, like they're just going to run it up. But, your Montreal and your Detroit and your Buffalo, like Ottawa could easily handle all three of those teams I mentioned, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they might surprise some people. I don't know if they're going to I think their goal is probably going to be the playoffs, as it should be at this point. Because again, at some point you have to kind of go for it. And I think they are in a tough division though. That division is going to be no joke this year.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think they've done a good job of acquiring pieces, and I think not making the playoffs this year won't be the end of the world, but I think they've got enough pieces now that they should be a threat in that bubble area. I think. Like again, Are they better than Florida? Probably not. Are they better than Tampa? Most certainly not. Are they better than Toronto? I don't even know what to make of Toronto this year. Like, you know what I mean? So there's some ifs there. I don't know. I don't think Montreal even makes the playoffs after being in the Cup final.
I would agree with that. I would also say, as we've seen the last couple of years, it doesn't matter if Toronto is better than you, because they'll still lose.
That's fair.
But like I said, I'm not ready to pencil them in as a playoff team, but they've got good pieces, and that's you just look. I mean, I'm still optimistic about Colin White. Obviously we'll see, but Drake Batherson had a breakout year. Josh Norris, Tim Stützle, and you got Brady Tkachuk there, Connor Brown, like Nick Paul. These are all guys who thrive playing in Ottawa.
Yeah, and goaltending is going to be a question mark for sure. But
that's
aside from
one
that,
thing.
Yeah. Aside from that, I mean, like I said, they've Pierre Dorian, for a guy who's probably caught a lot of hell over his reign, is like, if you look back, I mean, hindsight's 2020, but I mean, like looking back, he's done a hell of a job in just an awful situation with an awful owner.
Yeah, no kidding.
So let's talk about some of the teams in our division as we go, and I think we're gonna we'll cover a few teams, and then we'll get to some Shark stuff because I feel like we've probably, depending on what's going on with the schedule, I obviously look at summer's coming to an end, the season's starting up, and then with the season starting up, all of our regular shenanigans on Teal Town USA are going to start up. So I don't know how many Teal Tinted Glasses we have left. I'm thinking maybe we have one left in us. So I'm going to try and leave some teams that we can do for our next show, because I do believe we have at least one more left in the tank. And then after that, we'll see what happens as far as content and where everything fits. So I promise you one more show. Anything beyond that, I don't know. I mean, again, once the season starts, there's obviously going to be after darks and everything, and you will see my beautiful face for radio plenty of times. So let's start with the Anaheim Ducks. Not a whole lot going on in Anaheim, obviously. Like, I think I looked over their list of guys coming in. Like, they really didn't change anything. I mean, their guys exiting. David Backus retired today. Happy trails to David Backus. And Ryan Miller retired. Again, another guy, happy trails. Like, two guys that I have a ton of respect for. Unfortunately, you were Ducks, and that makes you suck. But, and like the only guy they brought in of any note to me, and this is just because I watched a ton of Barracuda games once upon a time, was Buddy Robinson coming in, who's probably going to play on the Gulls. But other than that, I didn't really see Anaheim doing a whole lot. They have like $14 million in cap space. And this is a team that, to me, they're coming along, but they could probably use another big impact piece in the draft. And with the players that are coming over the next couple of years, I don't think Anaheim's in the same spot as LA where they can start adding pieces to go for it.
No, I agree with you there. They, at bare minimum, they've got 1 year left of being bad. Bare minimum. But I even think that's being a bit generous. I mean, you just look. What I think is really important is the fact that they got Ryan Getzlaf back. I know, as a Sharks fan and Sharks fans, we're trained to hate Ryan Getzlaf, but I think he's a really good player, and I think he's a really good captain, and he's very important to that team. And the fact that he says, you know what, I know where I'm at in my career, so just give me whatever money you can. And he went from $8.25 million to $4.5 million.
Yeah.
So, or I'm sorry, $3 million, with the potential bonuses to bring him to 4.5. So, took a haircut to stick around, be the captain, be the face of the franchise. But even if Anaheim is bad again this year, I personally think they're going to have a lot of really fun players to watch. I mean, they've got a handful of a handful of young players at forward that I quite enjoy. They have Max Comtois, Troy Terry, Sam Steele, Isaac Lundestrom. Like, these are all players that I enjoy watching. And they've got Trevor Zegras, who I think probably should be in the NHL, at least to start. And then they'll kind of go from there. But you're right. You look at this team, you look at where they're at. I mean, come trade deadline, I don't see, Ricard Raquel and Josh Manson, who are pending UFAs. I don't see a scenario where they stick around.
No.
And I think, like you're talking about, you need that impact player in the draft. Maybe they get picks or prospects for these guys that can be that impact player, or maybe they flip them from super more for young NHL ready talent. I mean, I agree with you. Anaheim's not there. They're not close.
They're in the lottery. Like, they're in the lottery, and they're probably going to be a team that I think will be in the lottery, really high in the lottery.
For sure. Absolutely. But I think at least at forward, the prospects and the young players they have, I think, are quite exciting to watch. So I think that's something to keep an eye out if you do enjoy watching, young players play. I'm very curious about John Gibson because...
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, because that's where I was going to go next.
I would argue top 5 goalie in the league, and I always got the impression that he was just going to stick it out and be there no matter what. But then you see, I don't know if you saw, I guess Carolina was close to acquiring him at the deadline, and Pittsburgh as well was actually talking to Anaheim about him as well, and he's actually from Pittsburgh, whatever that means to you. So, I mean, he's got 6 years left at $6.5 million, which I think is a bargain.
And he's
for
not
him,
old. Like John Gibson feels like
28.
He's like he feels like he's been in the league forever, but he's not old.
Well, yeah, that's because he, if you look, he had, I think, 4 rookie seasons or something.
Right, yeah,
like that.
something crazy.
But they, obviously the Ducks are far away from contending, and they, but they just got him signed to this long-term deal, and I wonder if they would sell him so quickly. Whether that's, I don't think Carolina is an option anymore, but I really could see Pittsburgh step up to the plate here, and I don't know if that's something Anaheim would be interested in doing, but.
Well, Pittsburgh's going to be all in. I feel like as long as they've got Malkin and Crosby, they're all in.
Right.
Like they're going to go until the wheels fall off that team.
It's just, if you're Pittsburgh, I don't even really know what you give up at this point to
that's it. Yeah.
To get John Gibson,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? Because the problem was like, and again, like 30's not old, but but that's usually when you get like up in the 30s, especially like when you get into the mid 30s, like that's when goalies, especially, that's when, the wear and tear really starts to kick in for a lot of guys. Like not every guy can be Henrik Lundqvist and play until, until they're 40 at a high level. And that's going to be the gamble for Anaheim, right? Is John Gibson going to keep this play up when they're finally good, or is the wear and tear of getting shelled every night gonna add up, and there'll be nothing left in the tank when that happens? I like John Gibson. I think John Gibson's a hell of a goalie, but again, this is a guy who gets shelled a lot of nights.
And it's just unfortunate too, because the last 3 seasons he had 58, 51, and 35 starts, 35 in a 56 game season. So like, he's the starting goalie, so he's obviously going to get the most amount of starts, but like to your point, it's tough starting a guy that much when you know that you are bad. You know?
Yeah, because I mean, it's going to go one of two ways, right? Like maybe he is a guy in the line of Lundqvist who is just going to play at a stupid high level, up into his advanced years, or is he Thomas Vokoun that gets completely shelled when he's younger, and then by the time he gets on a good team, he's the treads worn down to the tire, worn down to the rim.
Yeah,
like that's I guess my question with him. So I don't know. I mean, Anaheim, to me, they're going to be a bottom team. I don't know if the Sharks are going to keep them company down there, but they're definitely going to be down there. Right. Yeah. So I think, I don't know. I mean, Anaheim, they're doing, like, as a rebuilding team, I still think they're doing a lot of the right things. I just think it's going to be a couple more really painful years for them.
I would agree with that.
So we'll move on to Calgary. I think Calgary is going to be an interesting team this year. Projected cap space about $3 million. They brought in Trevor Lewis, which I really like, and they also brought in Blake Coleman. And Mr. Kevin Lacey is jumping on here, so just give me a second while I move everything around.
I think you guys were really spot on about the Ducks, and John Gibson is my biggest question mark, just given the fact that he's 28 years old, which is not old by any means, but given his injury history and how he tends to wear down the second half of each season, will he have what it takes by the time the Ducks mean something again, matter to the league again?
Yeah.
And I don't think you guys, I like you guys mentioned Pittsburgh and Carolina. I heard Edmonton maybe spinning the tires on that, but that being interdivision, I don't know if that's really in the Ducks' best interest. So, and hello everyone, I'm Kevin Lacey, and it's good to be on and chatting with you guys. It's been quite some time, and yeah, thanks for having me on.
Are you going to turn your camera on, Kevin, or?
I'm not planning to.
Okay, give me a second, then I will just put list box over you, and then we'll just go like that. Boom. Set.
Thank you.
All right. So, welcome to the show, Kevin. Glad that you are on. I've now finished adjusting the screen, so hopefully it looks all pretty for everybody.
Yeah. Let's move on to Calgary.
Calgary Flames.
In there.
All right. So the Calgary Flames, 3 million cap space in Trevor Lewis, Blake Coleman. I do like both their additions. Going out, Louis Domingue, Josh Levo, Alexander Petrovic, Zach Ronaldo, Derek Ryan, and of course Mark Giordano going to the Seattle Kraken. What do you guys make of Calgary this season? Because I think there's a couple teams where I don't know what to make of them, and Calgary is one of them. Because I feel like I look at this team on paper and I feel like this team should be better than it is, and better than it's been the last couple of seasons.
Guys, I think it comes down to, well, maybe not entirely, but Sean Monahan has not been healthy the last couple of years. And I feel like it's, 3 straight off seasons that we've heard about him having surgery. I might be mistaken about him having surgery this off season, but I know he had the 2 previous. And Elias Lindholm's probably their number 1 center at this point, but I mean, what successful team relies on 1 center? Like, you usually need 3.
Vegas
minimum. What's up?
Vegas.
Wow. Okay. but Backlund's getting a bit older there. They really need Sean Monahan to come into his prime and be a star. And it seems like there's something holding him back. I don't know. And you could kind of say the same thing about Johnny Gaudreau, I think, where this guy should be tearing up the league. Even more so, I think, with Gaudreau. Gaudreau, I think, Gaudreau kind of gets in his own way by being a baby on the ice sometimes. But both of these guys need to lead the way, in my opinion. And the names that we're hearing mostly are Dubé and Mangiapane, who are second-line players at best, in my opinion. Not at best or worst, to be honest.
Yeah,
right.
And then Matthew Tkachuk. But why are those the guys who are constantly making the headlines? Why is Gaudreau not there and angry with Daryl Sutter and things like that? I think the Flames. I think the reason, Ian, you don't know what to make of the Flames is because there's so many underperforming forwards on this team.
Yeah, and it's to the point for me, like, I have to wonder, like, you've brought in Daryl Sutter, who is a guy who gets a lot quickly and then wears out his welcome. And I have to wonder if this team can't put anything together under a full season of Daryl Sutter. Does this team have to get blown up?
I think so. I mean,
what else is there to try at this point?
Right. Well, and I think Kevin makes a good point too. He's talking about Gaudreau and Monahan. They need to be the faces of your franchise. And I go back to that 18-19 season. Gaudreau has 99 points. Sean Monahan has 82 points. And you look at what they've done the following 2 years. Gaudreau with 58 and 49, and then Monahan with 48 and 28. I think in the case of Monahan, I think you're right, Kevin, when you say that the injuries have obviously not helped his case. But if he is healthy, then it really makes you question kind of what's going on over there. And I do agree with you. I think Johnny Gaudreau would be better suited to stop being a baby. But
it's not because he's 5'4".
No, he's a
baby on the ice.
Yeah, and I just think, I mean, they're both good players. I'm a fan of Sean Monahan's, but at the same time, you have a situation that's clearly not working out, or at least not working out the way that it should be, and it doesn't hurt. I don't think it hurts to look elsewhere. I mean, like you said, you've got Elias Lindholm, who can be number 1 center. I'm a big fan of Mangiapane, and Dylan Dubé as well. I don't think you need to build your entire team around those three. You obviously need more, but I think it's a good start, and I think it allows you to explore moving Monahan and Gaudreau, specifically considering there's a lot of teams who are really looking for centers. I'm surprised Monahan hasn't fetched more interest elsewhere, but it's just so weird because I've expected Calgary to be good for far too long, and they've let me down every time. But I don't know. I look at Elias Lindholm, and that year I mentioned with Monahan and Gaudreau having really really good stats. Lindholm was on that line with them, and he's now been either on a different line or centering his own line, and his game hasn't really dropped off, but theirs has. So if you're telling me that Gaudreau and Monahan can only be superstars with Elias Lindholm, as much as I like Elias Lindholm, I think there's a problem there.
Yeah, and I'll let it go to you, Ian, but real quick, because you guys mentioned the blow up. If this isn't working out with Sutter, you may need to blow it up. That'd be a huge detriment for Calgary because they blew up the team to get to this team. So blowing it up again for the second time in 7-8 years? Ooh, that would just be horrifying if you're a fan of the Sea of Red.
Yeah, I don't know, because like I said, if you brought in Daryl Sutter, and if that doesn't work, I don't know what else you try with this team, because I think they've tried everything. They've tried players, coaches, they've tried they've now with Daryl Sutter, not so much the players coach. I feel like this team has tried just about everything to get this to go, and I think sometimes unfortunately the sum of the parts isn't good. And I wonder, could this team make the playoffs? I think they might, but I'm not holding my breath. I think they're in that weird purgatory where they're maybe good enough to make the playoffs, but they're not going to do anything if they get there. And even if they don't make the playoffs, they'll still be at the bottom of the lottery. That's where I would put the Flames this season. What about you guys?
I would agree with that. The Pacific is not as deadly as it was a few years ago. I think we've talked about that quite a bit.
For sure.
But, there is a chance for them to make some noise in the division. If you ask me, the only locks are Vegas and Edmonton. And from there, it's kind of jump ball. So Calgary does have an opportunity, in my opinion, to kind of get back to where they were 2-3 years ago. But at the same time, like you said, Ian, I just think, there's just a lot about this team that's really just uninteresting to me. And I don't know. As it stands right now, they've only got one goalie signed, and that's Jacob Markstrom. So what? Are you going to play him for 65 games and hope for the best?
Yeah. I don't know. This team makes no sense to me. And it's going to be interesting to see, without Giordano on the blue line too. Giordano's obviously, I don't think he's the player that he once was, but he's still really good. That's a big hole for that blue line not to have anything to really fill.
Well, and obviously, Kevin's talked about it a lot. Teams were really hesitant to make any side deals with Seattle. It was more just take whoever you want and leave us alone. But I'm surprised that, at least, publicly, I'm surprised that Calgary didn't put up more of a fight to keep Giordano. He's their captain,
I think that they probably thought, we signed Chris Tanev last summer. And
no, dude, it's because Juuso Välimäki is recovered from his injury.
That's a player who I think is going to have a major spotlight on him.
I agree.
This season is Juuso Välimäki, because he's a player. He's the microcosm of the Calgary Flames. What's he going to be? I don't know.
Yeah,
I really don't.
I think that knee injury really screwed everything up for him.
Well, as Sharks fans,
we
know a number of players who have gone through that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna wrap this up for this week anyway, for this show, with the Edmonton Oilers projected cap space 0. Although I'm sure they can fudge around with once they actually hit the ice and get that to a different number. Coming in, obviously Duncan Keith, Zach Hyman, Cody Ceci, Derek Ryan, Warren Fogle. Going out the door, Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, Alex Chason, Tyler Ennis, and Dmitry Kulikov. They still have some outstanding business to do since Kaylor Yamamoto is not currently under contract, and I guess he hasn't been seen around the team thus far. I mean, I look at this team and like, this team doesn't scare me, but this team will be good in the regular season. Like, this team will win a ton of regular season games, especially in the Pacific. You know, are they a playoff team? I think, you know, Jerk said it best earlier. It's Vegas, Edmonton, and then jump ball for that third spot. And then, you know, will the wild cards both come from the Central? Could happen for sure. I mean, I would definitely not put money against that at this point. But maybe a team surprises us. I mean, you know, again, Edmonton, they're a good team. You know, it's hard to bet against a team with Connor McDavid until the playoffs, when you need other guys to kind of step up and carry the load, which seems to be their kryptonite. When, you know, Draisaitl, McDavid, they'll get you in the playoffs. But once the real games start, it's hard to get by when you can just zero in on those two guys and shut down their entire offense.
I mean, I said they were a lock, but I don't know. Even though, I too think they're a lock. But like, if you hear me say they're a lock, and then you look at their roster, it definitely raises some eyebrows. I mean, the goaltending, like, they essentially came out and said our goaltending did not work for us last year.
So we'll bring it back.
They're coming back with the same goaltending. Now,
yeah.
I personally think they're trying everything in their power to throw Mikko Koskinen overboard, but it hasn't happened yet. And I look at their blue line, I think in terms of dollars versus expectations, Edmonton is at the top of that list, because like, just look at the money they're paying these players: Duncan Keith, Cody Ceci, Chris Russell, Tyson Barrie, who had a good year, but we'll see. And then Darnell Nurse next year kicks in at $9.25 million, which is
9 is the new 7.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even say he's worth 7. To be honest with you, like, it's just mind melting, you know. Like, this blue line is so expensive, and I personally think will yield very little results. And their forwards are still, I mean, I like them bringing in Zach Hyman. I like them bringing in Warren Fogle, but it's like, yeah, Zach Cassian is still here, and Kyle Turris is still here, and Josh Archibald, and it's like, these guys have not worked out. Like,
not only that, Jerk, but you mentioned Cassian. Like, they brought in Hyman, they brought in Fogle. That's kind of the new school, the modern era toughness. They're not true tough guys like Zach Cassian, but they have a lot of grit, ton of intangibles, and especially Hyman can put the puck in the net. And we already saw what he could do with Matthews. I don't think he's going to have a problem with McDavid or Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins even doing the same. But if you bring in Hyman and Fogle, why keep Zach Cassian?
Yeah. No, it's a good shot. Like, it's a good point out. Like, I completely agree. You know, and the goaltending again, like you said, you know, you come back with the same goaltending, and I don't get it. Like, obviously, with the money that they're spending, they probably really can't afford to buy out Koskinen. Like that, you know, this team can't afford the dead cap. But geez, like that's a tough pill to swallow, I think, if you're an Edmonton fan, like trying to get excited, and especially without, you know, you've got already no projected cap space, and you still have to get Yamamoto. I don't think Yamamoto's going to break the bank, but he's a guy I definitely don't want to start the season without.
Well, and for that, they'll obviously they'll get to put Oscar
For
Klefbom on
sure.
long-term injury, which will help. But you're tempting fate
Mhm.
by having your top RFA unsigned and you've got no cap space. The thing that's always been really peculiar to me about Edmonton, specifically the last 2 years, is you remember in COVID season 1, like McDavid gets hurt, and so it's okay. Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto is going to be our top line, and they're going to play in all situations. And that line was very, very good. I mean, it got Leon Draisaitl to 50 goals,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then so you come back last year for COVID season 2, and it's like that line didn't play together at all.
Yeah. No, it's weird.
I feel like if I'm an Edmonton fan, I'm looking at like, why was this thing that's so successful not being utilized again?
Yeah. No. I don't know. I mean, this team
Now,
makes me scratch my head a lot.
now, all right, I do want to touch on the goaltending, but then I'm going to speak positive about Edmonton because all we've done is kind of bury them.
Oh, I mean,
Even
I
though
we haven't buried them completely
we
because we're all said they're a
to
lock.
make the playoffs, but all we've done is bury them. but the goaltending is definitely questionable. I have said many times, although I look at his stats and his stats kind of say otherwise, but I have said many times that Mike Smith is a hot and cold goalie season by season, and
Yeah.
usually it's a hot season, a cold season, a hot season, cold season. Statistically, that doesn't really prove my point too much, but a 923 save percentage last year as what, a 38-year-old or
Yeah, I
whatever?
know.
I
Phenomenal.
don't think he's going to be sustaining that this year. And then you mentioned his backup is Mikko Koskinen, who the Oilers have been actively trying to get rid of, and a player who I swear we had an episode where I went on about a 10-minute tirade about how that was the worst contract in the league, that extension. But yeah, I think if for the goaltending aspect, they're just going to ride it out, hope the team carries the goaltending, and then maybe they can dump Koskinen at the trade deadline to a seller who's just trying to make the floor and said, "Hey, we'll take your goalie if you give us a draft pick or something."
For sure.
And then maybe that opens up some space for the Oilers to get a upgrade, a big upgrade there, because I am not a believer in Koskinen, and I do like Mike Smith. I just think he's too hot and cold to be relying on him in the playoffs. But positive things, I think they have shored up their blue line quite a bit here this offseason. I think one of the big keys to their offseason has been the fact that they could retain Tyson Barrie. They were able to retain, Nugent Hopkins.
Nugent Hopkins, yeah. I think that was a big win for them for sure.
Yeah, I think those two players are a lot more essential to their roster than people give credit for, because usually the spotlight's on McDavid and Draisaitl. Puljujärvi had a decent year finally last year. It's not a great year, but still better than he's had previously, and he's kind of salvaging an NHL career at this point. But Bakersfield had 3 players last year. Their AHL affiliate had 3 players last year who had no business being in the AHL. Tyler Benson, Ryan McLeod, and Cooper Marody. I think at least 2, if not all 3, should make the Oilers this year. All 3 should, but will they? I don't know. But that influx of youth and some depth there to go behind McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nuge, and then Hyman coming in. And then on the back end, Evan Bouchard, I think, is one of the most overrated prospects in the NHL, but it seems like he's finally going to get a real opportunity to show that he's capable of being a middle pair defenseman. And then even some of the other guys like Philip Broberg, who's coming over from Sweden. I think Oilers fans are living in a pipe dream who think he can just go to the NHL right away, because most of the people reporting out of Sweden say he's not even close. But still, the Oilers, I think, have an improved roster in key areas, not including goaltending this year. So they'll be one to watch. But they might have the highest ceiling and the lowest floor
Yeah.
of any team in this division this year.
Yeah, I think that like that really perfectly sums up this team, right? Like they should be a lock. There's the talent on this team. Like again, it's not like this. It's a bunch of stiffs and Connor McDavid, right? Like there's some really good players on this team, but getting it all together, I wish they had a better GM. And I don't at the same time because they're obviously in the division, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I wish for McDavid's sake that they had a better general manager, because it just
Hey, at least McDavid will be competing for a gold medal instead of a silver cup this year.
That's
right?
true. I'm super excited for that. Let me tell you. Just in the chat quick before we move on, since we're going to move on to the some dark stuff anyway, just there's some PJ48 say, I want to know what league the Flyers were watching to make them want to sign Martin Jones. And then Eric Frieda said like Jones is going to suddenly be amazing just despite us. If Martin Jones can be amazing in Philly of all places, then I will eat my hat on air. Like it.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, like it's not only like Martin Jones obviously is fighting for an NHL career at this point, but like Philadelphia is not where goalies go to thrive.
It's quite the opposite, actually. Like,
Yeah.
like I would say historically, like if you go to Philadelphia, like you're like just give up.
Just
you know?
it's over. It's over, man. Better goalies have tried.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Really quick. We don't have to get all into this, but it's just something I thought about, and
Okay.
I think Kevin may have a lot to say about this. So,
Marcus Sorensen going back to Sweden? Sure.
yeah. So, Joel Farabee. You mentioned Philadelphia. Joel Farabee and his 107 NHL games got him a 6-year, $30 million extension. Now, I don't doubt that. Like you look at the stats. He's a good player. Chances are he's going to be a great player.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at this 107 NHL games played. This feels way too early for me to commit that kind of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I know Kevin and I always go back and forth about that. About you're paying this player for what you think he'll do, not what he's already done.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
I don't like that every player gets that treatment now. Like, I think there's some players that absolutely should get that treatment. But unfortunately, because of the way that the league is structured, then, an agent can unfortunately point and say, look, this is what this guy got. This is why my player is comparable. Pay me or we'll go to arbitration. And I will win an arbitration because, like, the reason why nothing ever gets to arbitration is because it usually favors the player almost every time.
Right.
I think the interesting thing, I'm pretty sure it was a tweet from Jerk, and I don't have it in front of me. I think Jerk was the one who put it. Something about, paying for what they are going to do versus what they have done so far. That is the way. When I read it, like when I read the tweet, I thought, that's what an unrestricted free agent is. Those are the types of deals that UFAs sign. And I think that's why I have the biggest problem now is the owners or GMs by continuously now giving out these contracts freely is they've removed the power they've held in their hand by these players are restricted free agents.
Yeah.
But now the players and the agents are in complete control, and it seems to me like it defeats the purpose of restricted free agency because the GMs are just go, oh no, even though we have your rights and completely control you, here's $14 million, please don't leave us, like as if they have control over that.
Right. But I mean, on the flip side though, like if you got like a young player, like I'm just going to say, for example, and maybe this isn't the right example to use, but if you have like a Cale Makar and you tell him to sit at home and then you go into the season and everything goes terrible, like that's your job on the line, right?
Yes, but I would also a player like Cale Makar
You give what he wants.
versus Joel Farabee.
Yeah, right. No,
Yeah.
I get it.
But I get what you're saying though, and yeah, I mean, in that respect,
I mean, if they sit out and then the team flounders, and we've seen players come back. Like, I mean, I think still players are still in much better shape than obviously they were in yesteryear, but we haven't really seen a holdout, but I wouldn't be shocked to see, a player come back from a holdout and not do as good as he should have been because he's missed camp. Like, again, these players are in better shape than they've ever been in.
William Nylander,
Yeah.
Jesse Puljujarvi.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was interesting, especially like same thing, the same exact thing happened with Drake Batherson as well. Same thing. Good player, will probably be a great player, but in Batherson's case, 99 NHL games.
Yeah.
And going back to Farabee, like Farabee didn't even, this deal kicks in after this year, so it's 5 years next year plus this year, so 6 total or whatever the tweet is, and he had no arbitration rights.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think for a player like that who's made an impact
where's the
in their career-
leverage? Yeah, like where's the leverage there?
Right, like he's made specifically with Farabee, he's made an impact very soon into his NHL career. So you don't want to go all Doug Wilson first year RFA on them, but
Right.
But at the same
I was
time,
going to bring that up.
but at the same time, like, what exactly are you so concerned about?
Yeah,
I mean,
know.
unless you think he's going to get 35 this year, and then you have to pay him 7 instead of 5.
Yeah. So that you guys found the word that I was searching for the whole time I was talking. Leverage. The owners have the leverage. The GMs have the leverage as signing RFAs. Like,
especially ones with no arbitration rights. Like those guys should get screwed to the wall. I mean, it's not great for them, but I mean that's that's just team management.
Well, and that's the thing, to spin it around and put it on the Sharks, everybody this coming summer, everybody's really worried about Mario Ferraro and Nikolai Knizhov. Go to Cap Friendly. There's no hammer next to their status. Like, they're going to sit down and they're going to take what Doug Wilson gives them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have to take this off the rails for a sec just because of what you said. This summer, everyone's worried about what Mario Ferraro's contract status is. And Nikolai Knizhov. Doug Wilson is on the hot seat. What will he do? Will the Sharks make the playoffs? Wah, wah.
Oh, PJ, thanks. PJ 48 for my hat fund when Martin Jones was here. Here's what I'll do, because actually I saw something in the chat that's even better. I will do this on air. If Martin Jones plays 20 plus games and has a save percentage over 915 league average, I will shave my head on air.
Wow.
20 plus games, 915 save percentage. That it has to be 20 plus games. 20 plus games with a 915. I will shave my head on air. Book it.
Well, I don't know where the Sharks are at with replacing the pillar decals outside, but Martin Jones is still tealing together on the side of the arena. So, will Martin Jones ever actually leave the Sharks to go put up a 915 for Philadelphia?
I have no idea. Okay, let's talk some Sharks, because that's what we're supposed to do. The San Jose Sharks had some coaching changes.
Say what?
Well, Rocky Thompson is not returning to the bench. Cites unmedical specified reason for being unable to get vaccinated. Now, I don't know if he is allergic to something in the vaccine or has a bad case of the freedoms, and I really don't care. I don't care either way, right? But I was disappointed by this. I'm not going to lie. Like, Rocky Thompson is a guy who was, and I tweeted this out when it first happened, he's a guy who is a rising star in the coaching ranks. Now, I don't know how this is going to derail that. coming into the season. I understand some people like looked at how the Sharks played last season. Well, how is this guy a rising star? Like the Sharks were terrible. Yes, I get that, but I still think that given everything that the Sharks are going through, went through, and will go through, I don't think that derailed him too badly. And actually, I was kind of surprised that he didn't interview for more vacancies this summer when there was a ton of coaching vacancies, because this always to me he wasn't the guy that was going to be here to replace Bob Boughner. He was going to be a guy who was going to come get some reps in at the NHL level and then interview for another job and be like, yeah, I've done this at the NHL level now, regardless of, how you felt about how the Sharks played. So, I mean, I was disappointed by this because I thought I was looking forward to seeing what would happen, under a more regular season with, a whole season under, and I think this is going to be a big season for Bob Boughner, obviously, too. But I was looking forward to seeing what the Sharks would look like if anything would change with like a full season of this coaching staff. So to have this kind of happen right before the season with everything else going on, I was pretty bummed out about this. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I definitely remember how happy you and I especially were about this pickup of Rocky Thompson last summer. It seemed like it was a coup. Like, oh, finally some joy, some respectability that we're going to have with the coaching staff. And not that I don't dislike Boughner. I just,
I just don't think he's the guy for the job.
Yeah, exactly. But I really liked Rocky Thompson. I thought he'd be a beacon of hope. Like I've seen through television documentaries and stuff what he can do in the locker room, or what they show us anyway. And it seemed like he had a very positive outlook, really relatable to the players, and not necessarily a player's coach, but just knows how to relate to the players and connect with them. And that whole thought about the not so great hockey players turn out to be great coaches kind of thing, like he had that going for him as well. So it is very disappointing to me. And the only thing, and we're not going to find out, I can imagine we're not going to find out, but I wonder how long in the process this has been. Have the Sharks been aware of this for a while? Were they waiting until the last possible moment that,
Well, it happened pretty quick after they announced the protocols for this season.
That's what I
think
mean.
the Sharks were waiting for the, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, dang. That's all I can really say is dang.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Jerk, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Kevin summed it up really well. It's unfortunate just based on, like you said, the potential of what he could bring to both the Sharks dressing room and any other dressing room if he got hired by a head coach. And, hopefully, if, assuming everything gets back to some form of normalcy here in the next year,
Never.
Maybe he can get behind another bench.
Yeah, and I'm curious, if the door is still open for him to return down the line, but at the same time, is Bob Boughner going to be around by that time too? He might not be.
Is he in his last year?
I believe so.
It was a. Let's see.
I
believe he has
more than.
I think it was
more than 2 years left, but I think this is his last year.
Yeah, because I believe it was it was. No, because he was an interim coach. I believe. I'm trying to do like math in my. I believe next year, so 22-23, I think is his last year, because I think it was he came in as the interim, and then when he officially became head coach, I believe he received a 3-year deal. So this coming year would be year 2.
Yeah, because he was on Dvorak's staff,
right?
And then
Hey, if Rocky Thompson, for whatever reason, can't return to coaching anytime soon, or maybe just doesn't return to coaching altogether, we can at least look down the line at the future celebrity boxing match between Rocky Thompson and Evander Kane when both are out of the NHL.
Oh my god.
And I will take Rocky Thompson in 2 rounds.
Oh,
Nice.
wow.
There you have
See,
it.
who says all the Evander Kane needs bad? Yeah, so he was replaced by John MacLean. John MacLean he's done most of the work he's done in the NHL has been as an assistant coach. He was an assistant coach in New Jersey from I think like 2002 to 2010, where he was promoted to head coach and then fired very quickly after that. He did get a cup ring as an assistant coach in 2003 with the Devils. He also won the cup as a player. He also had stops in Carolina and New Jersey along the way. Carolina and Arizona, as well as New Jersey. I think for the spot that the Sharks were in, I feel like this is a decent hire for them, given the lack of time. Given the lack of time available to really get a guy, at this point in the season, most guys are already scooped up. There's not very many guys looking, especially for an assistant coaching job at this point, right? I think anyone who's not working right now is probably looking to be a head coach for some of the bigger names that are out there. So I think all things considered, I feel like the Sharks got lemons and they made lemonade. Like, am I super excited about this coaching staff? No, but I think that they got a decent guy given the situation.
I think for me, guys, the big concern is now I have not verified any stats, so it's all hearsay.
Okay.
But I heard that John MacLean really did a poor job with the Coyotes power play the last couple of years.
Well, good thing that's what he's bringing Brown into San Jose to fix.
Exactly. So he's coming in to work with the forwards and work with the power play, and I had heard he did a pretty poor job with their power play the last couple of years.
Oh.
And I mean, the number of years that Jerk said that Coyotes would make the playoffs and they didn't, you could point the finger at a lot of different directions, but to me, offense was a big part of it, or the lack of offense was a big part of it. And with John MacLean coming in, it doesn't give me a whole lot of faith. Now, the fact is, he's been a coach for what?
Ever.
14, 15 years. I mean, dating back to 2002.
Yeah.
So he's been around. He knows what he's doing. So you can only rely on hearsay so much. And I think coaching, it's more about the chemistry with the players than it is about the ability to coach. I mean, everyone at this level has the ability to coach. It's whether or not you can connect with your players or not, which is, again, going back to the Rocky Thompson thing, I thought that would have worked out really well.
Yeah.
Jerk, do you want any? I have one more thing to add, but Jerk, do you want to talk on MacLean?
I'll just say really quick, because you mentioned the Coyotes. I've watched, admittedly, probably too many Coyotes games over the last 4 years, and
on MacLean.
and when you say that their power play was bad, you're like so right. Like, their power play was legitimately uninspiring, and you just look at like the talent that they had. I mean, they're not like, they don't have any elite level talent except for maybe Clayton Keller, which is a bit of a stretch, but they still had good players. And the fact that their power play was so bad despite having those good players, it is definitely concerning bringing him into San Jose. But every team is different, every player is different, so who knows, maybe it works out. But if we're basing this solely on recent history, it is a bit questionable. And also, AJ mentioned it in the chat as well, but I did notice evidently Cap Friendly now tracks team staff contracts. So
nice.
Bugner's in year 2. This coming season is year 2 of 3 for his contract. So that is E5 TTG5 confirmed.
All right, there you go.
One more thing, because I was doing a lot of coach research over the last week or so, just coincidentally, before this happened. And the thing I came across with John MacLean was the Coyotes had announced they were not bringing John MacLean back last offseason and then brought him back. So
Yeah.
they didn't even have faith in him the year before they actually officially let him go. My question, and I posed this to Curtis Bishelka on Twitter, was I remember when John MacLean was a player for the Sharks back in 97, 98, and he left the team. It seemed like he was pretty unhappy, and that was a team that made the playoffs. Now, maybe it was the Daryl Sutter factor. Gee,
For sure.
where have we heard that earlier in this podcast?
Right.
But I, again, it's all hearsay. You can only go off, you can only take it with a grain of salt. But John MacLean coming back 20-something years later after allegedly not really liking being here. Okay.
I mean, a lot changed in that time too.
Yeah. Heck, our jerseys changed, 4 times?
4 times, something like that. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I don't discount anything you're saying, but I still think, like, given the amount of time the Sharks had to get this done, the hire doesn't really surprise
they could have
me.
done way worse.
Yeah. Like, is this going to turn things around? I don't know. I don't think so. But I think with the situation the Sharks were in, that I wouldn't envy anybody. Like, they had to get a guy. They got a guy with a ton of experience. Whether that's going to be good or bad, I mean, we'll see.
I half expected them to just do the route they've done time and time again.
Who are you already paying?
Ricci, you're up. You're already under contract. You're up.
The who are we already paying method. Yeah. I wouldn't have been shocked to see that either, unfortunately. The who are we already paying thing. Just in the chat quick, Uncle Danfy says Bugner has a lot of good qualities, but as coach for the San Jose Sharks, he's been far below average with a familiar team. Sharks need a coach to really get them to play as a team. I mean, I don't know if giving everything we know now, do you put that all on Bugner? I mean, there's part of it, right? I don't think that Bugner was the right guy for this team, period. Just based on construction. I think Bugner, to me, Bugner is an assistant coach. He's not a head coach. I think he's always done really well as an assistant. He's never done fantastic in the big chair. And some guys are just better assistant coaches. And I think Bugner falls in that category. I think that given what we know now about the Sharks last year, I don't know who would have handled that with flying colors. I don't know. Like, I look at some of the guys that were available, and I don't know if any of them would be able to fix that problem. Like, do you go with a complete hard ass like John Tortorella? Is John Tortorella going to solve that problem? Maybe, but he's also going to, everyone, like I've said this 100 times, and I'll say it again, even though, because it's going to segue nice into what we're going to talk about next. Like, everyone wants John Tortorella until he runs a guy like Hertl out of town. Right?
Yep.
Like, everyone wants Tortorella until he runs your favorite player out of town, because he decides that he doesn't work hard enough, or he's not getting enough out of them, or they don't play with enough gritensity or whatever, right? Like, so I don't know, he's just responding like, you need someone strict. I think you have to remember, though, that the players, the problem is with a coach that's like super, super hard ass is the players have more power than the coach at this point. You can fire a coach if you, as we've seen with the team, if you bog a bunch of teams down with a bunch of big contracts, you can't easily move those. Like, it's not easy. It's not as easy to move a guy as it is to get rid of a coach. Right? So, I mean, it kind of, like I said, it kind of segues into what I want to talk about next, which is obviously, Hertl, a lot of fuzziness about what the future is in San Jose for Tomas Hertl. And I feel like this is the frustrating thing, right? For me, is I think going into this season, knowing that the possibility that Hertl might no longer be here, it sucks, right? It bums me out, but I understand the business of it. But now, given the summer we have, and like the fact that, you know, Hertl's come out and said that, like, you know, things should have been handled differently with certain players, i.e. Evander Kane, like, the idea that he could go now, like, I can understand why everyone's upset, because, like, whereas, you know, if this summer wasn't the summer, we look and we go, I love Hertl, but it's a business decision. I get it. I understand where this team's at, and I understand what this team needs to do. Now, it just, losing Hertl would just be much more awful, because it's no longer a business thing. Like, and I think that I want to be very, very careful here, because I think that when these reports came out, there was a lot of people that just jumped to the conclusion, like, well, Hertl wants out, and he wants out right fucking now, which I don't think was ever the case. And I don't think that's the case right now. But if certain factors that have happened this summer help push Hertl, out the door, that pisses me off even more. And I can understand why people are upset. What do you guys make of the Tomas Hertl situation?
Jerk.
It's awful, you know. I mean, because like Hertl's, I mean, he's been the best player the last 3 seasons, and he's a guy that you want to keep around, especially if the goal is to make the playoffs, challenge for a cup or whatever. But like, it's just awful, you know, because like, I don't doubt that if the Sharks did trade Hertl, they would get a huge return for him.
Yep.
But it's like, if you're trading Hertl, you're basically committing yourself to being bad. And Kevin and I have talked about it all the time. Regardless of what you think about the Sharks and the way they're built and what they're capable of, they're built to try and make the playoffs.
Yep.
And you don't try to make the playoffs by trading away your best player. At least not any teams that I've watched. So it's an awful situation, and it would be really shitty if Hertl got traded or just left because of all the nonsense with Evander Kane. And I know we talked about Kane at the beginning, and we're not really going to do that anymore, but I think at this point you just have to say, look, we'll pay you the money we owe you, but just go away and never come back. And especially if you want to keep Hertl, I think that has to be the play. And I know people, every time we talk about Hertl, people bring up his injury history. His knee hasn't been a problem in a year and a half, almost 2 years. So I don't understand the reason for bringing it up. He's still been an effective player. He had an awful case of COVID and was point per game the second half of the season. You know, I know people who had COVID. That shit tears your lungs up. And the fact that he came back and was that good, I have zero worry for his injuries. So like you said, Ian, before all the Kane drama came out, it was a business decision. And I even came out and said, look, if the Sharks want to commit to rebuilding and changing it up, that's the logical play.
Yeah, that's the logical play, right?
But if you are committed to trying to be good, as Kevin and I have talked about, you keep Hertl. And Hertl's going to say, I want the Logan Couture deal, and you're going to have to say yes because he's worth it.
Yeah.
Right.
The Sharks are in a situation where if they are close to making the playoffs, and by close I mean close. I don't mean like they're in 11th place but they're only 3 points out. I mean they gotta be right in there, like 7th, 8th, 9th by a point or two. You know, like they gotta keep Hertl because he is the face of the franchise right now, in my opinion. Money aside, I think he's the face that the Sharks fans
He's
need.
the most likable person on this team on a very, like I said at the top of the show, he's the most likable person on a team that is incredibly unlikable right now. Like an
Right.
incredibly difficult team to get behind. You know, Hertl is one of the few bright spots. You know, he's not alone. Like there's guys like Mario, obviously, who are, you know, like there's other things that are nice, but there's a lot of shit to dislike about this team right now.
Right. Right. Heck, I go by the arena to and from work 4 times a week. And I just talked about Martin Jones is still on the side of the arena, but the column right next to him is the happiest picture of Tomas Hertl you possibly can. And it's like, how can you not love that guy? I'm like, even if it's the goofiest pose possible, I'm like, I can't not like that guy. Anyone who goes by there can't not like that guy. And so I think if the Sharks, unfortunately, if the Sharks are out of contention, you know, before the trade deadline, he has to go because they're going to get major assets for him, even as a pending unrestricted free agent. They'll get a king's ransom. But
Yeah,
they need the Sharks, if they're contending, they have to find a way to make it work. Even like what Jerk said, pay the guy. You have to have someone to build around. And it's kind of like we talked about John Gibson with the Ducks, like where are they going? If the Ducks are going nowhere, like we see, like it seems like it might be time to just move on and let him go contend somewhere. If the Sharks are nowhere near the playoffs, same thing for Hertl. He's the same age.
yeah.
So, but oh man, I mean that would be a bitter pill to swallow for sure.
Yeah, and I'm like in the chat, like a lot of people are saying, like, you know, you got to keep him, you got to put the C on him. I just here's the thing, like, and I'm not I have been on record saying that, you know, my pick for captain would never have been Logan Couture, but I don't think the C's going anywhere. And a lot of people are saying, well, you got to leave because Hertl's going to be, you know, I think he's the face of the franchise already, but a lot of people say, well, he'll be the face of the franchise in the next phase. I don't agree with that. Because at that point, like, if all things go well, like maybe it's not Hertl anymore. Maybe it's William Eklund. Maybe it's, you know, Thomas Bordelot. Maybe it's Tristan Robbins. Like we don't like. A lot of time is going to happen before I think that C is going to wander to a different player.
Well, especially with, like, you know, Logan Couture is on record in the past of being, I don't want to say butthurt, but you know, unhappy with the decision to not include him in the leadership group. And you know, when the year they took the C off of Thornton and they did the rotating alternates, you know, Couture insinuated that he wanted to be a rotating alternate, you know, and when the decision was made to give the C to Pavelski, you know, I'm not saying this is true, but there were a couple people that said, you know, I wouldn't, you know, I think Couture may have been a little sour about not getting the C himself. And so at the very least, there's a history of him possibly not liking certain leadership decisions.
Well, that's the reason I don't like him with the C, because I think he's a moody bitch. Like, and I've said this 100 times. Like, this isn't new, right? Like, I've always said Logan Couture is a moody bitch.
And my point in bringing all that up is, if you did take the C off of him, I mean, I think he would.
I think
well, the
he'd
thing
be
is,
traded. I don't think he's getting stripped.
Right, but what I'm saying, like, if you did take the C off of him, I think he would eventually get over it and just play. But I also think that he would be upset about it.
I don't like. There's some, like, we've seen a lot of really stupid captains changes on this team. Like, Patrick Marleau had the C taken off of him, and it was like the best thing they could have done for him because he was a completely different player without the C. Right. Thornton stayed Thornton. He didn't care. I mean, he cared. I'm sure he cared, but he, you know, like, he's Joe Thornton. It's just his personality, right? Obviously, Joe Pavelski left the team, so that's why the C went up. Like, but like, I feel like you're not, if you stripped Logan Couture and you left him on the team, like, I don't think that's gonna help anything on this team, considering everything that has happened that we know has happened now. Like how, like, I don't see that improving anything, because as much as all this Evander Kane stuff super sucks, and how much of that can you put on Logan? Like, how is that Logan's fault?
Well, and that's the point I always bring up is, you especially with this past season, you get a lot of people say, "Oh, Logan cracked under the pressure of wearing the C, and he's hit the age wall. He can't do anything anymore. Look at the stats." And it's like, have we all forgotten that he spent the second half of the year injured?
Oh yeah, he was a shell of himself. The
Not only
second half
that,
of the season, yeah.
but let's also not forget the first half of the season, he led the Honda, CRV Western Division, whatever. He led the division in goals.
Yep.
For an extended period of time. So like, that's the thing that always kills me is like it seems like when a player's injured and they're not themselves, like there's no concern paid to the injury. It's just like, oh, this player sucks because they're not doing what they did. But then, like, for example, like I made earlier, a player like Hertl who's had injuries in the past, but they don't define him anymore. It seems like people can't seem to let that go.
Like, yeah, and I think that's fair. Go ahead.
Just
Sorry.
The same thing. And I hate to get off on a tangent, but it made me think of this. Like the same thing with Erik Karlsson. Like, somebody took a slap shot and the puck hit Erik Karlsson in the thumb and it broke. How was that his fault?
Well, I mean, if he just would have drank another cup of milk, I'm sure it would have been fine.
But you know what I mean? It's just there's this weird feeling with injuries where it's like there's an injury and people are like, oh, well, he sucks. And then there's a past injury that's not a concern anymore, but everybody loves to talk about it. It's just so weird to me.
Yeah. I agree. Like, I don't think taking the captaincy from Logan Couture is the answer, especially with everything going on. Like, I think that there's a lot of things that have happened, but I think there's a lot of accountability that needs to go beyond. Like, it's really easy to just look at the guy with the C on his sweater and go, well, clearly that's the problem, right? Like, I understand, like, again, I'm not a huge Couture for captain guy, but I think it's really unfortunate that I think he takes more blame for things going on than he probably should, as far as the team. Like, I think the coaching staff has to be more accountable for this, and I think management has to be more accountable for this. At the end of the day, I mean, now I don't know what you do, because Evander Kane is nuclear waste at this point. Like, no one's taking him. So I don't know what you do with him. I don't know. And if that, like, it sucks, because like, I don't like the notion that, oh, well, the Sharks are going to, the Sharks have chosen Kane over Hertl. I don't think that's the case. I just think they're in a bad situation that they can't get out of at this point. The buyout windows are closed. I don't know of another team that is going to be like, yeah, gee, this guy seems like complete fucking hell on your roster, and he's caused all these culture problems. I'll take that player. Like, even a team that would normally, like in Arizona, who would normally be like, yeah, give me all your picks and we'll take that player because we have so many players on the LTIR, we can fit them under our cap and everything will be cool. They're not even going to look at him twice. And the problem with the Evander Kane thing is NHL contracts are guaranteed. You can't just cut a guy. You can't just send him home because you don't like him anymore. I mean, you could suspend him you could suspend him indefinitely, I guess, and continue paying him, but it's going to count against your cap. Like, I don't know what the Sharks are supposed to do at this point. And, like, I think the idea of, oh, well, now they've chosen Kane over Hertl. I don't think that's the case. I just think they're in a shitty situation where there just might not be a good way out.
Yeah, I think the Sharks right now are looking for I don't know if path of least resistance is the right term for this, but just the
trap door.
Yeah, God, this is gonna be a horrible comparison, but it's like the United States is trying to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. There's no easy way of making that happen. You just pull the troops out, sure, but that there's gonna be repercussions of that. And it's kind of the same thing with Evander Kane, where yeah, you could rip the Band-Aid off, but it's gonna hurt a bit.
Mhm.
Or you can let it heal, but it's gonna take a while, and hopefully the scab will go away sooner than later.
And like, it's funny. The podcast's been very worldly tonight. I had a George Bush reference earlier. Now we've talked about like, geez, this podcast tonight. I don't know. I mean, look at the end of the day, I think that the Sharks have a tough decision to make when it comes to Hertl, because again, I like the player, but I also understand the business aspect of it, and yes. I understand that sometimes your favorite player is going to go. Like, that's just the reality of the NHL, unfortunately, right? Players move a lot, unfortunately. So I think at the end of the day, I think the Sharks have a really crappy business decision to make when it comes to Hertl, because do you add another contract? And let's be clear about something here. I think that the 3-team no trade list is gonna vanish now, and we're gonna go back to the no movement clauses, because expansion's over. And the reason why the new movement clauses disappeared was because expansion. And I think now that expansion's over, they're gonna make a big comeback, not only in San Jose but probably across the league.
Oh joy!
So that's something you have to consider if you're going to re-up Hertl. Is that going to come with a no move clause? That's something you got to consider. There's no easy answer here. I think that's the point I'd like to finish on. Like, there's really no easy answer. You say, yeah, you got to keep Hertl because Hertl's the likable guy, but at the same point in time, like, if this doesn't get back on the rails, and there's not a whole lot of signs that it will. Like, at some point, you have to start tearing it down. And Hertl's one of the easiest places to start with. Because, again, if this team can't get good by the time they're good again, is Hertl going to be the wily veteran? Or is he, the wily veteran that you want to keep around because he's seen hell and he's traumatized war refugee? Or do you want to, have a new look across the board?
And the thing is, based on the interview that he had, you also have to wonder, how much does Tomas Hertl want to stay in San Jose? Again, if the Sharks aren't near a playoff berth, you have to trade him, because he likely is not re-signing with the Sharks.
Yeah.
I would almost guarantee that, just based off the interview that he had.
I mean, the fact that he said he doesn't know if the Sharks want to keep him, like,
is that negotiating though? Like, and that's the thing I did want to ask the question. Like, some of this has got to be just negotiating, right? Like, if he just comes out and says, yeah, I want to stay in San Jose is the best. I can't keep doing the really fast talk, but San Jose is the greatest place I've ever played. I want to be here forever. Like, that kind of weakens your negotiating leverage with everything going on, doesn't it? Like, at some point he's got to like do some stuff for him too, right? Like, he's got to, maybe I don't want to stay. Maybe I need a little more money. Maybe, like, we don't know how much of that is negotiating as well.
No, that's a good point. And I think, yeah, you're right. If he was to go, if he was going to do something for the Athletic and be like, oh yeah, like you said, I love San Jose. It's the best city ever. I love playing here. Doug Wilson's going to be like, well, you love playing here, so take this deal to stay. Versus, I don't know. He says, I don't know if the Sharks want to keep me. I don't know if he says what he says. And I think you bring up a good point in saying it is a negotiating tactic, but I think there's just something about it that's really weird. Like, why? Like, he says, I don't know if the Sharks want to keep me. Why wouldn't they? You know, like unless
Yeah.
like and I'm just basing this solely on what Doug Wilson says, where the idea is to accumulate future assets while also trying to be a playoff team. And as I said, 20 minutes ago, you don't get better by trading away your best player.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the situation with the Sharks sucks. And hopefully it'll get better. Because like I said off the top, this is the least excited I've been for Sharks hockey now. Probably once the puck drops, some of that will dissipate and go away once there's actually games and stuff to talk about. But man, this summer it's been a mess. Let's get some final thoughts in, Kevin. I'll start with you. What's your final thoughts on the night, my friend?
Happy trails, Marcus Sorensen. Enjoy your $14 million US over in Sweden.
Yeah,
That you
good for him.
absolutely should have taken, because you won't make that money here. And please tutor William Eklund to the best of your abilities.
There
as
you
well.
go.
My final thought. I try to be right more than wrong. I try not to be wrong. But what a concept, But I'm also willing to fess up when I am wrong.
Are you going to finally admit that you were wrong when I was talking about how much I liked Noah Gregor 5 years ago?
Wait, what?
Never mind. Continue your story.
So 6 years ago, we're not 5 years ago is too soon. 6 years ago on this date, I put out a tweet that I should probably just delete, to be quite honest, but I will fess up here. 6 years ago, I said the San Jose Sharks currently only have 5 NHL-ready defensemen. It wouldn't hurt them to give Ian White a tryout. Yeah, that didn't age so well, knowing that he had his post-concussion psychotic breakdown. But then I couldn't stop. Then I had to add on and say, also, Daniel Paille is better than Barclay Goodrow. Now, in my defense, at the time, 6 years ago, Daniel Paille was better than Barclay Goodrow. In fact, Daniel Paille had a lot of the qualities that Barclay Goodrow has now. Unfortunately, Daniel Paille found himself having his career ended in Sweden by a vicious Mike Richards-esque elbow, whereas Barclay Goodrow has won 2 cups in a row and is getting fat money in the Big Apple. So, there's a tweet that we will never bring up again. I'm at Kevin Lacey 22. Follow me for better content with better knowledge now 6 years later.
Hockey jerk.
Okay, so you can follow me on Twitter at hockey_jerk. If you feel compelled, if you don't like me or you want to make fun of me, just don't make anything up. If you're going to make fun of me, say things that are true. I'm down with that. Okay, so a lot of people have been talking about Noah Gregor. Where's Noah Gregor? Why isn't he signed? No arbitration rights. Not a lot of NHL experience. The Sharks are at 50 contracts right now. And for those who don't know, you're only allowed to have 50. So a bit of a pickle. But players that you send to the Canadian Hockey League, in this case, Ozzy Weisblatt, Tristan Robbins comes to mind. When these guys go back to juniors, they won't count for a contract spot.
You mean Brandon Coe isn't going to be on the Sharks this year?
I'm sorry to tell you, Kevin, but he won't be.
What? He got he got a number upgrade. He took True's number. Clearly an NHLer.
Oh man.
So fear not. Noah Gregor will re-sign as soon as a contract spot opens up. No need to worry there. Now, the point I made about Noah Gregor, and I'm starting to think that Kevin maybe doesn't remember this, but 5 years ago, 2016 NHL draft, we were talking about the picks the Sharks made that year. And for those who don't remember, which why would you? It was 5 years ago. The Sharks picked Dylan Gambrell, Noah Gregor, Manny Viederer, Mark Shoemaker, and Joachim Blichfeld.
Yep.
I was a fan of Noah Gregor.
We all
And
were.
Okay. I mentioned that on whatever podcast we were doing at the time.
Yeah.
And Kevin was not so. You were complimentary, but you were kind of like, I don't know about Noah Gregor. I'm not sure yet.
I know you bring this up, but I still don't remember ever being on that trip. Now I do remember after the first training camp saying I'm not so sure anymore about Noah Gregor.
Maybe that's what I'm referring to. However, regardless, Noah Gregor is obviously not some elite player yet, but I think he's an NHL player, and so, Kevin, do you change your mind at all?
I think Noah Gregor, man, wow, all right. So I like Noah Gregor, and I think that he's one of those guys who has no business being in the AHL, kind of like Benson and Marody and McLeod I mentioned earlier. I don't know what role he has in the NHL though.
Right.
Like I think if he was able to get stronger physically in the off season, that would help him a lot. He's got the speed for sure. His speed's tremendous. And I think he's got a very good shot and decent hands. He's got a lot of upside, but he is kind of like the overlooked guy. I don't know. Overlooked by me, at least. Maybe not Jerk, obviously. But he is the one guy that I think gets lost in the shuffle in this roster. And I don't know where he fits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. No, it's
Not
been
that
a
he's
month.
bad, I just don't know where he fits.
Right. No, it's been a month since we did a show, so I felt I had to just poke at you a little bit.
Don't make me bust out my Victor Arvidsson joke.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I just think when he's been with good players like Couture, I think he's thrived very well, and so I don't know why he didn't really get that opportunity again last year, but
Yeah, right.
oh
right.
well.
And that goes with the fit is I don't know if he's a Bob Bugner is a big fan of his. Like the way he deploys Noah Gregor is kind of limiting.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Bob Bugner shouldn't be the coach of this team. All right. I don't know. I don't remember what I did last week, so I have nothing to like call back to and beat these guys over the head with, unfortunately. Which is probably for the better. My final thoughts are this. I'm excited for hockey to get started soon. Not just the NHL hockey, actually. NHL hockey is probably the least excited hockey I am, but I am excited to see because I think the Barracuda is going to be an interesting thing this year, and I do want to watch more Barracuda games this year. I'm super jacked for junior hockey to start again. I can't believe how much I've missed going to the rink. And there's a bunch of players that are going to be going back to the OHL. So I am super excited to circle those dates on the calendar and get my butt to the arena and then be able to come, on a show. I don't know what show, but to tell you guys what's what, at least from what I see. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to. We're almost there. The summer from hell is almost over. Let's hope it doesn't become like this COVID where it just never ends. Let's hope the summer of hell ends and doesn't just become the fall of hell and then the winter of hell and then the lack of playoffs of hell. That's, I think, all I can hope for at this point. Like, just Evander Kane, don't be COVID. Yeah. That's a terrible comparison, but at the same time I feel it's apt because I feel like with every day this thing gets worse and worse and it never gets better, but hopefully it will at some point. And we can, like I said, we've got a ton of content coming up as soon as the puck gets closer to drop. You'll start seeing more familiar faces, I'm sure. on the channel, Teal Town USA. Sorry, Teal Tinted Glasses. Like I said, probably got at least another show in us, and then we will go from there to see what happens before the season starts. We have gone longer than I thought we would, but I guess after being off for a month, we were allowed. So, like I said, in a couple weeks, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about Vegas, Vancouver, Los Angeles. I don't think we need to talk about Seattle because like there's no in and out with Seattle. They got a team. So I think we've given Seattle enough talk. I think we can talk about maybe where they might end up, but that's what we got to look forward to going forward. So we hope that you will come and join us again when we go live next, and I will try and give you more advance notice next time. And we thank everyone that was with us tonight. So without further ado, that is it. We thank you all for being here and hope you have a fantastic evening, and we will see you soon. Good night.